bother to do it? If you can't get these orders enforced, why try? And what should he have done differently?
You know, I think everything was done right in terms of his legal strategy and the advice he followed from his attorney, and he carried his case to the very end. Unfortunately, because of the ages of his children, and probably because there were two daughters, you know, no judge is going to force two teenage girls who want to live with their mother to live with their father.
And why did they go through the trouble of having a custody battle where testimony was taken and a judge, why try it? Why put them through it?
Well, the law in the state of New York is very clear that a parent who interferes with custody and the relationship between the child and the parent is deemed unfit. That is a factor in the fitness of the parent. And the judge in that case, as any other judge, has the authority to take away custody from a parent who is interfering to that level.
How often do they throw mothers in jail?
They almost never do that.
So, do the mothers know that they're not going to be put in jail?
You know, mothers know that. I mean, a lot of what happens in these court proceedings is that all that happens is a slap on the wrist, and sometimes not even that. But when petitions are filed, violation petitions are filed, contempt proceedings are brought against mothers or against alienating parents, it does tend to have a disincentive effect for most people that are engaged in that sort of campaign. There is, though, a very small minority of cases that nothing will stop an alienating parent who is going to do everything within that parent's power to remove the children from the relationship. They will stop at nothing. They will exhaust every penny in their bank account. They will try every legal strategy.
And there are no legal remedies.
There are legal remedies, but even legal remedies have their limits. And in the case where you have two teenagers, you know, a judge is going to be very concerned about the psychological effect of forcing two teenage girls to live with a parent that they don't want to live with. It's not fair, but it's a reality. Judges are very worried about the long-term psychological impact of forcing children.
Turn to Amy. Why, the question, I still have the same question, why do it?
Well, you don't know how it's going to turn out till you do it. He knows that he did the right thing. His kids know on some level that he fought for them. But I think, you know, I have data that shows, again, 50-50 on gender, no orders are enforced. There's
fathers are not thrown in jail either.
Correct.
All right.
But unfortunately, what happens in these cases is, you know, parental alienation is a perfect intersection of legal and mental health issues. And a legal solution only takes you so far. If this judge had known that the kids need to be deprogrammed, I know that's not a popular term, but put into some kind of intensive psychotherapy where the implanted ideas about Rich could be undone, then there's a chance that it would not have backfired.
Can the deprogramming, and to me this is the question, can the deprogramming be done if there isn't removal from the alienating environment? Is there any hope of successful deprogramming?
Part of what I was told was that if the children were younger, they would have recommended that the mother have no contact, and that would be the only way that they could more or less guarantee that these kids would have two parents, that they would have a better shot at life.
But here, you're a firefighter, so let me just give my analogy, and I really want your comments on this. If your house is burning down, you don't consult with the forensic firefighter first to decide what to do with your kids. You get them out immediately, and once you've gotten them out, you don't put them back on alternate weekends and every Wednesday. You get them out, you keep them out, and I think an alienating home is a house on fire. And I want to know whether or not, if the children have any contact with the alienating parent, deprogramming is possible.
Well, if you use the cult analogy, you certainly can't have somebody think critically about the cult while they're living in the cult or visiting the cult leader on the weekends. So the few people I know who are doing this work seriously do say the gate has to be closed. The kids can't have access to that alienating parent for at least a certain period of time. The truth is there's only a handful of these programs around the country. They operate sort of in, you know, in isolation, almost secrecy. Most people don't know about them. Certainly judges don't know about them. We really need to bring these programs into the light, manualize them, evaluate them, test different programs, and find out really how to help these kids.
Tell us what happens, because this is what your book is about. What happens if the children are not removed? And I'm going to want, before the show is over, I'm going to ask you to help Rich. He has two daughters. If the children are not removed, I think judges don't understand the consequence of keeping the children there. Tell us about the harm that can be done where children are left in.
This is a terrible thing to do to a child. To cut them off from a parent is to encourage these kids to be entitled, arrogant, to the nth degree. We're not just talking about spoiled, we're talking about corrupting their moral compass. To give a child permission to denigrate and to cut off a parent is to over-empower these children. At the same time, these kids become completely dependent on this parent, the same way that cult members are dependent on a cult leader. Cult leaders don't want their cult members to think critically, to think for themselves. Same thing, your wife doesn't want these kids to think for themselves because then they would be piecing things together. She wants control of them.
So what are the long-term consequences
They're not
then?
fully developed human beings. They're not authentic.
What damage? Let's assume a judge is watching the show.
Depression, serious depression, drug abuse, high rates of divorce. These people marry people like the alienating parent. Half the people I interviewed who were parents had already lost their own kids. This is intergenerational. It just gets passed on.
Absolutely.
It's like your kids are going to grow up to marry somebody like their mom,
Absolutely.
and when they get divorced,
Yes.
that person's going to turn their kids against
Do you
them.
think judges get it? Because I don't think they understand what Amy is talking about, the severity of not acting.
Well, I think most judges, first of all, judges receive training on these types of issues, and I think every judge is aware of the issue of parental alienation. But what people need to understand is when a case comes into the court system, usually it's already at a time of crisis, and things are already deteriorated to the point where the judge is faced with a mother and a father, and in every case it's a he said, she said situation, and the judge doesn't know who to believe. Almost every judge is going to give the benefit of the doubt to the mother with the children. This is just as a safety measure because all of the statistics show that domestic violence or acts of violence or sometimes these allegations, the perpetrators usually are men. So that the system has a bias built into it in favor of women.
Jackie, how do you approach it so that you can, as an advocate, persuade a judge that the situation is urgent? Do you get on the table and pound your shoe? I mean, seriously, what do you do?
It's not a matter of pounding on the table. It's a matter of when you have a case and if there's clues or a pattern of parental alienation, it's very important that it be documented, whether I tell my client to keep a journal, to keep a record, keep a calendar to show which visits were missed, what incidents occurred, if there's tape recordings, and it's very important to get into court early and not wait months and months when the estrangement has become sort of ingrained.
And this brings us to what I know Amy wants to talk about, how to prevent it, that the first signs, I mean, I think, you tried everything, Rich, but when you went to court, it may have already been too late. And I would like to know, when you first see it developing, what should you do to stop it from progressing?
What happens, I think, is the targeted parents say, oh, I think my ex is bad-mouthing me, but okay, I'm just going to take the high road. I'm not going to bad-mouth her. I'm not going to point it out to my kid because I'm as bad as the other parent, so I'm going to do nothing. And then they say, oh, so there's no photographs of me in that other house. All right, so that's not so bad. They don't really connect the dots. They don't see that all of these things are not isolated. It's part of a pattern.
It's very confusing. It develops over time. At first, you begin to see that you're having less and less time with the kids, and that the other parent is taking the kids more and more, and that the kids are becoming, that they're listening to you less. And then you find out that the other parent is not supporting you in when you're trying to correct the kids, and it begins to accumulate the alienation.
What would you have done differently, Rich? If you could go back and now back in time 10 years ago, whenever this started, and you saw it starting, I mean, it's a tough question, but what do you think you could have done that you didn't do?
That's a tough question. I think it comes from the personality of the other parent. So I don't know how you stop that, except you try to, well, you try to learn to pick the right people to begin with, and
well,
when
you didn't, obviously.
Yeah, and you didn't, and then so I'm just saying that's
the
the way
way
to do it.
There are things you can do. Targeted parents get into this trap of either being, because they want to take the high road, they basically do nothing. And they don't. I believe that they don't understand that there's ways to interact with your child that can preserve the relationship. You can't change that other parent. There's probably nothing you can do. They have a personality disorder. They're going to do what they're going to do.
Specifically, give us some suggestions. What do you do?
Well, let's say you send cards to the other parent and they throw them out.
Yes.
Okay. What do? You take your child when you have them. So this presumes that you're getting this early enough. You don't have the point where your kid's refusing visitation. You take your child to the store. You pick out a card together with your child. You never bring up the other parent. You put some stickers in it, some gum, whatever they're into. If they're a little older, magazines. You go to the post office and you mail a care package from you to that child with the child to go to that other parent's house. Never saying, see, I'm sending you something. See, I think mom or dad is throwing this out. But there's ways to show your child that you are thinking about them, you're trying to reach out to them, you're communicating with them. They'll get that even if you don't, even if the other parent throws it out.
If the alienation progresses to a point where it's a little bit worse, my theory is, and what I advise fathers and mothers,